Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
Today, our mission is pretty specific, but really crucial, I think. We're digging into a key source for film history, cinema, the magic vehicle, the goal, to pull out the foundational stuff from films that genuinely shifted how movies were made.
Yeah, the ones you might have missed but shouldn't have.
Exactly. We want to give you that sort of instant fluency in classical cinema history. No fluff, just the essentials.
And we're going way back, before sound, color, CGI, right to the beginning of cinema getting serious, artistically speaking.
Yeah.
Think 1913 to about 1920.
Right.
And like you said, it's not just about the plots. It's about understanding the history, the culture around these films, why this film in this place suddenly mattered globally.
And our starting point for this deep dive is Scandinavia, 1917 specifically. A silent Swedish film called A Man There Was.
The original title, Terje Vigen. Victor Sjöström directed it.
Okay, Terje Vigen. Now, this film often gets mentioned as like the point where silent movies really started to mature. So what's the big deal? Why focus a whole deep dive on a Swedish silent film that's nearly 110 years old?
Because it tells us something fundamental.
Yeah.
Global influence in art, it doesn't always correlate with size or power, If you look at that specific early window, say 1914 to 1920, Sweden, pretty sparsely populated country, suddenly punches way above its weight.
Right.
It exerts this huge, really disproportionate influence on world cinema. The films coming out of Stockholm at that time were, frankly, groundbreaking in their artistic depth.
That does seem counterintuitive. I mean, you think about the industries already growing elsewhere, right? Hollywood was ramping up, France, Italy, they already had strong film traditions. How did a smaller nation, kind of isolated geographically, manage to, as the source puts it, conquer world markets?
Yeah, it almost entirely comes down to one thing, geopolitics.
Yeah.
Specifically where Sweden stood during World War I. While all the major European powers, France, Germany, Britain, were just completely bogged down in the war.
All resources going to the trenches.
Exactly. Energy, manpower, money, everything. Sweden maintained strict neutrality.
So it wasn't just that they avoided the conflict, it was that this created like an opening, a vacuum.
Precisely. That neutrality is what allowed for this conquest of world markets, as the book says. While other national cinemas either stopped production or were forced into making propaganda, Sweden could just keep making high-quality films with universal themes, and crucially, they could export them. They basically turned neutrality into a massive market advantage.
So geopolitics literally opened the door. But, an open door doesn't guarantee great art walks through it.
Sure.
You needed the talent there to actually seize that chance. Who are the key figures who built the Swedish Golden Age so quickly?
Well, it's actually a remarkably tight group, almost like an artistic dream team. Really just four central figures.
Yeah.
You had the two absolutely essential directors, Victor Sjöström, who we mentioned, and Moritz Stiller, both visionaries.
Right.
Their work was supported, really driven by Charles Magnusson. He was the ambitious head of the main studio, Svenska Biografteatern, AB Svenska Bio for short.
Got it.
And then underpinning the whole visual style was their cinematographer, Julius Jaenzon. Just an outstanding talent, J.J. Julius, sometimes credited. So a real powerhouse unit.
And Sjöström was kind of the leading edge, defining the style. I know he had a strong theater background.
Yes, very much so. He'd actually emigrated to America for a bit, came back, built a solid reputation in theater as an actor and director. Then he joined Svenska Bio in 1912.
Okay.
And he'd made some films before. Terje Vigen, Ingeborg Holm in 1913 got some attention for its social realism. But 1917, A Man There Was, that's widely seen as his first true masterpiece.
The one that made the world notice.
Exactly. And this film, it wasn't just entertainment. It was commissioned with very specific, almost high-minded goals in mind.
Right. The source material spells this out clearly. There are sort of twin objectives for Sjöström and Magnusson with this film. First, they wanted to ennoble the national cinema.
To elevate film.
Yeah, basically lift it out of being just cheap entertainment, give it the same kind of cultural status as, say, serious theater or literature.
And the second goal, which was incredibly relevant given, the World War raging at the time, was to sound a pacifist note in the midst of war. So the film itself, even though it's set more than 100 years earlier, was intended as a direct comment on the suffering and, the futility of the conflict happening right then.
Okay, let's get into the story of Terje Vigen itself. Because understanding that core narrative, that tragedy, is key to seeing the film's ambition. It's set in 1809, right? Napoleonic Wars era.
Correct. We follow Terje. He's a Norwegian fisherman, and he's driven to a pretty desperate act.
Why? What's the situation?
His family, his wife and young daughter, are literally starving. There's a British naval blockade of Norway's coast, cutting off food supplies. So Terje decides to risk everything. He tries to run the blockade in his small boat, smuggle food back home. It's this primal story. An ordinary person pushed to extremes by circumstance.
And it goes wrong. His capture is the turning point.
Absolutely devastatingly wrong. He gets caught by a British ship, the food is lost, and he's imprisoned on a British prison hulk, basically a floating jail.
For how long?
The war ends in 1814, so 5 years. He's finally released, makes his way home, only to find the absolute worst has happened.
His family didn't make it.
They died of starvation while he was imprisoned. It's just crushing. This quiet, prolonged agony. He waited 5 years only to come home to absolute tragedy. He has to live with that.
Wow. That's incredibly bleak, and the film is built around that immense, quiet suffering and grief. How did Sjöström even convey that kind of emotional weight without dialogue, in 1917? Cinema then was often quite broad, melodramatic.
That's precisely the genius of it. He used the silence, the landscape, the actor's face. Sjöström himself played Terje to show that internal state, moving way beyond just action or exaggerated gestures. And the story doesn't end there. The narrative then jumps forward quite a few years to the climax. Terje is older now.
Still living with this loss.
Yes, haunted by it. Living by the sea that, in a way, took everything from him. And then chance gives her an opportunity for revenge. He's out fishing, a terrible storm blows up, and he ends up rescuing the occupants of a yacht in distress.
Okay.
And the man he saves, the captain of the yacht, it turns out to be a very same British naval officer who commanded the ship that captured him all those years ago.
No way. The man indirectly responsible for his family's death.
Exactly. Terje has him, helpless, at his mercy. His enemy delivered right into his hands during a storm. He's absolutely ready to take his vengeance. But then he sees the officer's wife and, crucially, their young daughter on the boat with him.
Seeing another family innocent.
It completely shatters his resolve for revenge. In that moment, facing this terrified child who reminds him of his own lost daughter, he chooses forgiveness. He lets them go safely.
So the whole film builds to this moment of choice.
Yes, it's an analysis of character transformation through suffering. The journey from understandable bitterness, that burning need for retribution, to this final, incredibly hard-won act of grace.
That ability to portray such deep feeling, that complex internal shift, that's the breakthrough. Okay, let's talk about how he did it, the artistic tools. What levers did Sjöström pull in the silent era to get that psychological depth across?
Well, we touched on it earlier. There were two huge assets the Swedish filmmakers had: that strong Scandinavian literary tradition and the landscape itself. The magnificent, often harsh, natural environment.
And Sjöström fused them.
Brilliantly. The intellectual depth came from writers like Henrik Ibsen, Selma Lagerlöf, major figures.
And the Ibsen connection here is really direct, isn't it? It's not just inspiration. A Man There Was effectively the first truly serious film adaptation of a major literary work.
That's right. Sjöström reportedly got the idea after visiting Grimstad in Norway, which is where Ibsen actually wrote the original narrative poem, Terje Vigen.
Wow.
And they leaned into that literary connection heavily. To give the film that status they wanted, that equality with theater, they actually used lines directly from Ibsen's poem as the intertitles in the film. The text on screen was the poem.
So the poem gave the structure, the emotional core, but Sjöström had to translate that into purely visual terms.
Entirely. And that's where his mastery shows.
We said he could create psychologically complete characters, which was just not the norm in 1917 cinema, right? Most films use stock types, heroes, villains.
Very much so. Clear good guys, bad guys.
Yeah.
Simple motivations.
So how did Sjöström signal these complex interchanges visually, without sound, without relying on just, fist shaking or weeping?
He used the environment as a mirror, as a reflection of the internal state. His dominant theme, really across many of his films, was analyzing how people are changed by hardship, by suffering. And the key element here was the sea.
Right. The source calls the sea the main actor in the film, not just scenery.
It's absolutely not just a backdrop, it's an active force.
That's so.
Well, think about it. The sea is what threatens the family with starvation, forcing Terje's journey. The sea is where he's captured. The sea is where he weighs out his imprisonment, metaphorically. The sea brings his enemy back to him in the storm. And the sea is the setting for that final climactic choice. It literally generates the drama. It gives the story its immense scale, its breadth, and it acts as this constant counterpoint to the small, intense human emotions playing out.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more. This idea of nature as an active force is really the defining insight of this whole Swedish school, isn't it? What's the ultimate takeaway on the sea's role here?
The source offers a brilliant insight. The sea becomes a modern version of the Greek chorus.
A Greek chorus? How does that work?
Well, think about what the chorus did in classical Greek tragedy. It commented on the action unfolding on stage, right?
Yeah, it spoke for the community, warned the characters sometimes.
Exactly. And it reflected the overall mood, the tone of the tragedy, back to the audience. Sjöström makes the sea do that. Through cinematography, through its visual presence, not through actors speaking.
That's a powerful concept. Can you maybe give an example? How does the sea visually determine the mood, the psychology?
It's often about the contrast between the immense scale of nature and the vulnerability of the human figure. You see Terje's tiny boat against this vast, indifferent, powerful ocean.
Right.
When Terje is hopeful, maybe setting out, the sea might be calmer, the light clearer. When he's captured, the waves might be rougher, the visuals darker, more oppressive. The sea becomes his prison.
Okay.
And in that final storm sequence, when he's wrestling with vengeance, that raging storm isn't just bad weather. It's the external chaos mirroring his internal turmoil. The sea itself seems to embody the destructive path he could take, or the peace he could choose.
So the forces of nature are literally reflecting, almost dictating fate and emotion.
Precisely. And this masterful use of the environment, these elemental forces, to provide psychological depth and drive the character's journey, that became the signature of Sjöström's work.
Yeah.
And it defined the whole Swedish school. A Man There wasn't just a successful film. It really kicked off that golden age for Swedish cinema and set a whole new standard for dramatic filmmaking worldwide.
What a fascinating arc. So in just this one film, we see how geopolitical necessity, Sweden staying neutral in the war, opened up this space.
A vacuum.
That allowed this incredible concentration of talent, Sjöström, Stiller, Magnusson, Jaenzon, to really push the boundaries. They took literary ambition, fused it with the raw power of the landscape, and used that to transform silent film, moving it from, simple stories or spectacle towards real psychological depth, with the sea itself acting almost like that Greek chorus for the main character's inner life.
And that idea, the non-human chorus, that's a really potent thought to take away from this. We saw how Sjöström used nature, the sea, as this powerful symbolic force reflecting and shaping the character's mood and choices.
Right.
So maybe a question for you to think about when you're watching films or even high-end TV shows today. What non-human elements are directors using now in that same way? Is it the stark, imposing architecture in a thriller? Is it the overwhelming, maybe isolating technology in a sci-fi story? Or just the weather, used intentionally?
What things are serving as that modern psychological chorus?
Exactly. What's setting the mood, mirroring the character's inner states, commenting on the human drama, but without ever saying a word?
Look closely. Maybe the world itself is speaking the subtext.